Megan Kingston. I'm the Director of Guidance here at the high school. I'm very pleased to welcome you tonight as we sort of launch the college application admissions process for the junior class. It's exciting times for all of you. Tonight there's going to be two parts to our program. The first part, we have a panel of two college admissions experts here with us tonight. We have Drew Carter from the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, and we have Joe DiCarlo from Worcester State University. We're very, very pleased to welcome them back. They are very, very knowledgeable. They've been doing this for a very long time. We're just talking about that, how long we've all been doing this work. And so they are going to have an opportunity to share information specifically about their schools and also about the college admissions process in general. And the second part of our program tonight, our counseling staff is going to sort of walk us through the entire college search and application process and break it down in terms of timeline, components, and what you all should be focusing on when. We also had asked for any questions prior to this evening to be sent to us. We do have some of those, so we'll pepper those into our Q&A with our panel at the beginning. But if there's any other questions, there will be opportunities to ask questions anywhere along the way. This evening is for you. It's to help you feel more comfortable with the process. It's to help kind of launch this process for you and your family. So please embrace this and ask any questions you might have. All right, let's get started. All right, so can you both share a little bit about your schools and what you look for in applicants that are applying to your schools?
Okay, I think we're on, right? Ready to go. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Again, my name is Joe DiCarlo. I'm the Dean of Enrollment and Director of Admissions at Worcester State University. For those of you that might not be familiar with Worcester State, we're a public, medium-sized, liberal arts and sciences university. So we're about an hour or so from here in the city of Worcester. We're on the west side of the city. My friend Drew here at Holy Cross is on the east side of the city, so we're neighbors in the city of Worcester. We focus on the liberal arts and sciences. We offer about 80 different majors and minors, so a pretty broad array of academic programs for students. We're a 24/7 residential campus. We house about 40% of our students on campus, about 5,500 undergraduates, which seems to be a nice size for students that are looking for a smaller school type environment, but medium size in terms of maybe necessarily not seeing the same faces every day like you might, perhaps at your high school. We offer an honors program. We have undergraduate research, study abroad, internships. We offer about 40 different clubs and organizations in Division III athletics, so you get that full college experience. Being a public university, our costs are right around $10,000 or so for a student to commute to campus, maybe around $23,000 annually for students to live on campus, so we do consider ourselves to be a pretty affordable option for many families as well, which is really nice. Our enrollment is strong. We're coming up on our 150th anniversary, so we've been around for quite some time. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk to you about the college admissions process and a little bit more about Worcester State as well. Generally, what we're looking for in the admissions process, it primarily focuses on a student's academic preparation in high school. So we explain to students that if you have a solid B average coming out of high school, you are considered to be academically prepared and eligible for admission to Worcester State. Typically, your high school graduation requirements in terms of your coursework is going to satisfy what we're looking for in terms of your English and your math courses, your science and humanities, foreign language and social sciences and whatnot. For students that have stronger than a 3.0 GPA, you'll be competitive for our honors program or perhaps for a merit scholarship. And for students that are below a 3.0, we still want you to apply. We admit more students than we deny to the university. As a public university, we sort of have a public mission of providing or making accessible the opportunity to attend Worcester State for a bachelor's degree program to as many students that are eligible for admission and willing to do the work to be successful in college. And we determine that admission eligibility primarily off your high school transcript. Letters of recommendation, test scores, your essay are all optional for Worcester State. There's value if you submit them. We're happy to take a look, but for us, the transcript is where we place most of our weight. And again, a solid B student would be considered eligible for admission.
Oh, okay, all right. Hi, friends. I'm Drew from Holy Cross. And Holy Cross is a small school. We're about 3,000 students, so that puts us kind of on the big end of small. We're also a residential school, so almost all of our students live there on campus. We tend to attract the kind of student who pictures themselves as part of a community in college, one where they're living on campus, walking to class, walking to the dining hall, having a pedestrian college experience. We also, all of our students come in without a major. That's actually a requirement. This doesn't stop the adults in your life from asking you what you're going to study in college, but we at Holy Cross won't ask you. Students are still free to take any classes that they want and to pursue academic interests right off the bat, but we do require everybody to start as a blank slate, and I think that does reduce a little bit of the pressure involved with applying to college, but also once you start your college experience. Some of the things we look for in the admission process, this is a good time to ask this question. We're in the middle of application review right now. Certainly, to reiterate some of Joe's comments, academics is where our review begins. Good grades and good classes is a good place to start. We also like to see students who have been involved outside of the classroom, whether that's formally here at school or whether it's at home with family responsibilities or with employment or internships or service or whatever it might be. We don't necessarily place a value judgment on activities in the free time, but we like to learn about who the student might be on our campus. We're also test optional, and so if scores are submitted in the application, that's something we'll consider, but it's certainly not a requirement, and most of our applicants do not submit testing. And finally, I'll say we do like to see students who have engaged thoughtfully and authentically in the college search process, and that might involve logging on to one of our webinars or a visit to campus if possible. We also strongly recommend interviews as part of our application process. All of these pieces are in support of the academic piece, which is the most important, but we have a pretty sort of thoughtful review process, which we're in the middle of right now. And it is nice to learn about students, what they've done in their high school, but also who they might be on our campus as well.
Thank you. As students and families begin the college search process, what advice would you have for how to initiate that search and how to build a well-rounded college list?
I'll start with an easy one. Maybe I'll direct my piece of advice at the parents. And that would be to stop asking so many questions about your son or daughter's, your child's expectations, hopes, or preferences for a college. Remember, you're asking them about their preferences for an experience they've not yet had. When we say, do you want to go to a big school or a small school, far away or close to home, what do you want to study? All of these questions, because often students are filling in answers where answers don't yet exist, or they're not participating in this conversation with you, and you get frustrated. I get frustrated as well. So my advice really is to hold off on the questions, particularly at this point of the timeline, and just try to support them in providing exposures, if not mini exposures, to colleges and universities in a variety of ways so that they can start to build up their own vocabulary when it comes to colleges, identify their own set of preferences, and be in a better position to conduct a conversation with you, with their school counselor, with an admissions officer, but they need a vocabulary and they need to start to identify preferences before they can do that. So my advice really, hold off on the questions and help to provide these mini exposures. That could be, it could be a formal visit to a college campus nearby. It could be an informal drive-by on the way home from a visit to grandma's house. It might be logging on to a webinar. It might be doing a virtual tour, but keeping the pressure low and just providing as much exposure early in the timeline without asking too many questions. If you do that now, they'll be in a much better position to have these conversations this spring, over the summer, with the adults who care about them, you, their school counselor, and admissions officers, and they'll be able to give more authentic answers because they will have come to a vocabulary and a set of preferences from exposure, not just from guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would add is try to reflect a little bit on terms of what you're comfortable with, right? So there are over 4,000 colleges and universities across the country. There's a lot of options for students. There's colleges that are in rural areas, suburban areas, urban areas. There's large, medium, small. There's schools that focus on liberal arts and sciences, schools that focus on STEM or pre-professional. And so you have to sort of have a sense of what you're interested in so that the process doesn't get too overwhelming too quickly with all of the options that are out there. And also colleges have made it very convenient for you to learn about their schools, but almost to an extent that could also add to some of the overwhelmingness to it. For instance, you can do campus visits in a variety of different ways now. Before you used to have to get in the car and actually drive to the campuses. Now you can do virtual tours. You can do meetings over Zoom and have information sessions or meet with students or admission counselors over Zoom. So there's a lot of convenience that is available now as part of the admissions process, but can also sort of help, I think, to add on to some of the that feeling of, or sense of kind of getting lost in how to build that list. So think about what you're most comfortable, what type of college setting you're most comfortable in. Are you more comfortable in a smaller type environment, in a suburban setting? Do you have a good idea of what you want to study? Does the school obviously offer what you're interested in studying? Because if you're comfortable and you know what you're going to want and the school matches with that, it's more likely to be a good fit, right? If you think it might just be cool to go to the South to go to school because it's warm, well, cool might not actually be what the reality is when you get yourself down there, right? So be true to what you're comfortable with, be true to what you think is going to match what you're looking for in a college, and try not to get your list or start your search way too broad, right? Because there's just too many options, and we're going to be flooding you if you're not already being inundated with emails and with promotional materials, and all that stuff is really aimed to look really nice to draw you in, but just know that a pretty brochure might not actually be the reality of what you're looking for in an environment or a match for a school.
And as a follow-up to that, if the student doesn't know what they want academically, they don't know what they want to major in, you mentioned that you actually aren't going in with a major as a freshman in early class. How does that work at other colleges? Do you have to declare a major? Do you not? Is it preferred that you do or that you don't? How does that work at Worcester State or other schools?
Yeah, so you're going to hear us probably say, if not this time, a few other times throughout the evening, and we're going to start off by saying it depends, and it's going to depend on the school. So, at Holy Cross, you don't need to go in with a declared major. At Worcester State, you have the option to go in with a declared major, and one of those choices is undeclared. And for students that are undeclared, or not sure what they want to study, and that's completely fine. I mean, college for most, I would say for the majority of colleges out there, they want students to be open to academic exploration. So you're going to have students that come in with a declared major, and ultimately end up graduating with a degree in that program. But we also love students that come in and are open to perhaps accommodating students that want to change their major at least once or twice. I went to a liberal arts, private Catholic college, and I think I changed my major 3 times before I ultimately ended up settling in on a program. So most colleges are going to be built to support that academic exploration for students, whether it be through academic advising, through mentorship that you receive from peers or from faculty members, working with career services. So the majority of colleges out there are going to be flexible enough and accommodating enough with the curriculum that you can grow and change as your academic interests grow and change. And Worcester State's a school like that as well. Keeping in mind that there's always a little caveat to certain programs, right? So if you're thinking of going into highly competitive or highly selective majors like a pharmacy program, or for instance at Worcester State, it's our nursing program, those are going to be direct entry only programs, which means the only opportunity to get into a program like that is as a new student and as being accepted directly into that major. So for instance, our nursing program, we don't allow students to change their major into nursing once they're at Worcester State. So you can't come in undeclared and then change to nursing. We don't take a lot of external transfers into our nursing program, so it's direct entry, meaning your only opportunity to get in is as a new applicant, primarily coming out of high school. So although most colleges are going to be built for some of that flexibility, even a school that is like Worcester State, some majors still might be restricted in terms of some of that academic flexibility that might be available to you to change your majors. But I would say, generally speaking, it's great if you have an idea, but we also understand college is this opportunity. You're going to get exposed to faculty, to academic classes that you've never been exposed to before. So it's only it's perfect in many instances that you would be open to taking classes that you haven't been exposed to before, and naturally develop those interests. And we want to be able to support those students through that academic exploration and progression on our campuses.
You both talked about the importance of exposure and kind of getting onto campuses, figuring out what you like and what you don't like. What would be your suggestions about how families go about college visits? Formal, informal, what should they be looking for, all that kind of stuff?
I think I certainly recommend a mix, right? Trying to get some exposure to a smaller school, a bigger school. Again, this is all on a process to develop a vocabulary and a sense of scale. And I think sometimes families, especially early in the timeline, think a visit to a college campus is really precious, which it could be. It could involve an official campus tour, an information session, a conversation with one of us, but it sure doesn't have to be. It can be informal. You could just come on your own, park your car, walk around for 10 or 15 minutes, get a little feel of what it's like, and then leave. That's okay too. All of these exposures count and they matter. So don't hold out visiting because you think you need a great deal of time. Sometimes, like I said before, you're just on the way home from someplace and you see the sign on the highway that says, this college, that exit, and you just get off and you drive around for a few minutes. So I think variety is important early on. That's to help build up a set of preferences, variety in the kind of visits, whether it's official or unofficial, and also when in doubt, every college has a student union or a student center. Walk in that building, find that coffee shop, but grab a scone and a smoothie and hang out for 10 minutes. In that 10 minutes at that place where they serve food to the college students at that college, you will learn more about student life, about culture and community, likely than you will from any of those emails or brochures we're going to mail you nonstop over the next 14 months. So official, unofficial, close, big, small, variety I think is important really early on. And don't worry about it if it's got like your specific major or if you think you got a good chance at getting in. We're just trying to get exposure to types of schools so that you can start to build up that set of preferences to continue the conversation with your family, your school counselor, and admissions officers as well.
As we sort of move into college application and do actually completing their college application, they're gonna have to pick a deadline for like when they're actually gonna apply. Early action, early decision, rolling admission. What type of application deadlines do your colleges have, and what advice would you give to students in terms of how to pick what application deadline is right for them?
So there's a wide range of kinds of applications you can submit. To name a few, sort of the most common one would be a regular decision application, one that has a deadline and a notification date. Those usually tend to be in the new year, the second half of your senior year. There's also a rolling admission where you can apply really at any time and find out on a set period of time from which you've applied. There's also a wide range of early applications. Early action has an early deadline and early notification. I work at a school that does not offer early action but offers early decision. That's a binding application where you've only applied to one school early decision, and you've promised that school that you'll enroll if they choose to admit you. What schools you choose to apply to, that's a journey you go on as a student with your parents, and you listen to your neighbors and your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, and you talk to your school counselor, and you talk to your friends and your older cousins. That's great. That's how you're going to build a list of schools to consider and eventually to apply to. But when you get down to deciding which application round to apply to each of those schools, you have to talk to your school counselor, because that sometimes, that decision, whether you apply, whether it's early action or regular decision to Northeastern, or whether you apply early decision or regular decision to Holy Cross, that decision of which round to apply in can sometimes have a huge impact on what your likelihood of being accepted is. And that's not something necessarily that you can learn reading online. That's going to be individual to you in each individual application. So get information from all sources on colleges to consider, but when it comes to which application to submit, which round to apply through to those colleges, you have to talk to your school counselor, because that's really personal to you.
Where both of you mentioned that both of your schools are test optional. When should a student still consider setting their scores? Should they ever? Are there any other scores that would be helpful for you guys to see in the application process?
I'll probably, Holy Cross has been test optional longer than Worcester State. I'll just sort of provide a little bit of context of where we are in the test optional admission process. So we went test optional. As a public university, we actually have admission criteria that are sort of outlined to us by the Department of Higher Education. And up until 2010, 18 or so, we were required of students to provide test scores. Then they allowed us to explore a test optional pilot, and really COVID fast-tracked the state universities to move towards a test optional SAT or ACT test optional admission policy. And so we've been test optional since before COVID. We adopted test optional in 2018. Our research on our campus found that the transcript was really the best indicator of a student's academic preparation to be successful on our campus. And over time, really since COVID, we've kind of evolved into being more of a test blind. So we don't even really look at them if students basically have that 3.0 GPA or higher. There's really no minimum test score that you would need to gain admission to the university. If a student has below a 3.0, they're still eligible to apply test optional. We don't care whether or not they send us those scores. It's not going to have a negative impact on their admission decision or for consideration for merit or for our honors program if they opt not to submit test scores. But for some students that are really proud of their test scores, they will submit, and we're happy to take a look at those. But generally speaking, what we've learned over time is that the high school transcript, their GPA, the rigor of their curriculum, their grade trends, their grade performance are really the best indicators of their ability to be successful on our campus. And again, the test scores have really kind of fallen down the list in terms of weight in our process.
I'll sort of echo myself from before, and this is a great conversation to have with your school counselor in the fall of your senior year as you're preparing to apply to schools. Your school counselor is going to look at the test score ranges at the schools you're applying to. That's something you can do on your own, but I sort of caution you because sometimes you might be looking at incorrect or outdated information, so that's something you're going to want to check with your school counselor. Find out where your scores are in the range, whether it's the middle 50% or test averages at each school to which you apply. And the decision might be different from school to school. You might submit your scores to one school but not to another school. It might depend on which round you're applying in. It might depend on if you've got new test scores coming. So it's a great conversation to have with your school counselor. The last thing I'll say about this is, we consider testing when it's submitted. When it's not submitted, I want you to know that if you don't submit testing as a part of your college application, that admissions office won't think you did poorly. We don't think about things we don't see when we read applications, right? If you mention playing the clarinet, we will picture you playing the clarinet. If you don't mention a clarinet, we never think about a clarinet, okay? So if your scores are in the application, we'll think about it. If they're not there, we just won't, and we just frankly don't have time to stop and think about things that we don't see. So rest assured, if it's not in the application, we don't jump to assumptions that you did poorly. We just evaluate the information that's in front of us.
What's important for students to consider when getting letters of recommendation from teachers? What should they be thinking about?
It really does not matter who writes the recommendation. It doesn't matter where that person went to college. It doesn't matter how well respected they are at North Andover High School. It doesn't matter how proficient they are at teaching that course material. What matters is how well they know you, and what they're going to say about you in your recommendation. So, we generally encourage students to ask teachers that they've had sophomore and junior year. We generally recommend, if possible, to ask teachers within the 5 major academic areas, at least for one recommendation. But most important is that that classroom teacher knows you well, not what grade you got in that course. That doesn't matter to us. We're not going to correspond to that recommendation with your transcript to confirm the grade. We're just trying to get a sense of who you are in the classroom. So the most important thing is how well that teacher knows you, what kind of relationship you had with them in the classroom. And when in doubt, again, talk to your school counselor. They know these teachers. They can think about your application and maybe being thoughtful about the person that you're going to ask. They also have a sense of perhaps who might write you a good recommendation. So This is an important thing. Just also one thing I'll say about this is understand that teachers don't make things up in these recommendations. I think it's hard for students to imagine, like, what's in these recommendations? I'll tell you what's in these recommendations. Recommendations are filled with anecdotes that are observed typically on the second half of the student's junior year. So every day that you come to school right now, you are giving your teachers material for possible recommendations. I know it's cheesy when I say this, but you create your own recommendation. So it's a worthy exercise to think about, what do you want your recommendations to say? If that's what you want your recommendations to say, then give the teachers that content, okay? They are the chefs, but you are buying the groceries.
We're going to shift gears a little bit to more of the admission process and how you evaluate applications. So how do you weigh each part of a student's application when making an admission decision?
Yeah, I'll start because I think our process is probably a little bit more streamlined than maybe what Drew might experience if you're applying to a school like Holy Cross. But for Worcester State and probably schools that consider ourselves to be a little less selective, where we're admitting more students than we're not, again, really the process focuses on the high school transcript. I mean, that's literally all you need to apply to Worcester State or a school similar to ours. And again, in that process, in our admissions process, really the goal of our admissions committee is to offer admission to students that have done the work in high school to prove that they can make a successful transition to a 4-year bachelor's degree program. And how we're determining that is based upon your overall academic record. So we're going to take a look at your cumulative grade point average. We're going to take a look at your course selection, the rigor of your curriculum, your grade trends, and that information over the course of 3 years, maybe up until the end of your junior year. In some instances, the first or second quarter of your senior year is going to be evaluated in determining you for admission. We admit students generally to the university, but we do have some higher admission criteria for some of our more selective majors like our nursing program. So where we may be looking for a 3.0 generally, for all of our majors, for nursing we might be looking for closer to a 3.75, so a pretty solid A student for that major. All the other information, letters of recommendation, test scores, your essay, that's all supplemental for us. So we find that to be really valuable information, maybe for students that are more borderline for admission, maybe haven't achieved their full potential in high school, maybe haven't quite figured out their groove in terms of their academics, but they're demonstrating that they've got the motivation, they've got the support, and they've got the willingness to want to put the work in college to do well. And so that context that's provided through those letters of recommendation, through that additional information, through your essay, can be helpful for the admissions committee to see so that they can feel confident that you're going to put the work in and you're going to be successful when you make the transition to a 4-year bachelor's degree program. So for us, in our process, it's really about the academics first and foremost. If you've got a 4.0, you're getting into Worcester State really easily. But if you've got below a 3.0, anywhere to a 2.0, we're going to take a deeper look at all those other components of your application and make that determination of whether or not you'd likely be successful on our campus. Again, we really want to make the opportunity to attend college as accessible to as many students as possible. We pride ourselves on the diversity that we have on our campus in terms of academic diversity, social diversity, racial and ethnic diversity. But half of our students are the first in their families to go to college, and so we really pride ourselves on having that rich diversity and different perspectives on our campus, and feel that adds to the overall sense, on our campus, and it really has a positive impact on a lot of the learning that happens inside the classrooms as well.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things are the same at Holy Cross, and I do want to reiterate that the academics is the most important piece, because I'm going to talk about other stuff, but it shouldn't water down the student's academic profile. So what school you've attended, what courses you've signed up for, what grades you've earned, and then if submitted standardized testing, that academic profile is the engine and the gasoline in the Holy Cross admissions vehicle. But the other supporting documents are important. We have a great majority of our applicants are academically qualified to be successful to Holy Cross. Unfortunately, we can't admit a great majority of our applicants. And I think that's sometimes what families miss when considering college admissions in particular, or more in particular, selective admissions. It's it partly matters what the applicant's academic strength is, But more important is how that applicant compares to the overall pool. And that's why one year you can have a student, maybe 3 years ago from high school X get admitted to Holy Cross with a blank GPA. And then 5 years later, a student with the same exact GPA not get admitted to Holy Cross. What changed was the pool in which they were competing. So part of what we do is evaluate the application, and then the second step for us in selective admissions, because we have a lot of qualified students but not a lot of spots to offer, is how does that applicant compare against the overall pool, and then making choices within that pool to enroll what we hope will be a well-rounded class that'll sort of meet the needs of the college.
One piece of the application that a lot of students stress about is writing their essay. What do you want to read about? What don't you want to read about? What should kids be writing about?
I think families spend or waste a lot of time thinking about what they think we in the admissions world want them to write their essays about. You came out on a dark Tuesday night, I'll save you that effort and energy. No one cares. No one in the admissions world cares what you write your essay about. We read great essays every year on stupid topics. And we read horrible essays on what the guidebooks say is a great topic. We read great essays every year about grandmas, and we read terrible essays every year about grandmas, right? The topic of the essay does not determine the quality of the essay. There's no connection between those two things. There is a direct connection, though, between how you, the student, feel about the topic of your essay and the quality of your essay. You will always write the best essay on the topic that you want to write about. Not the topic you think you should write about, not the topic your parents think you should write about, not the topic your cousin wrote about a few years ago when she got into Clemson. You're going to write the best essay on the topic that you want to write about. Trust me, the topic that you really want to write about, whether it's serious or silly or sad, whatever it is, that's the topic that we want to read about. I do keep a list every year of my favorite essays, mostly just because I'll do workshops from time to time. It's on an Excel spreadsheet. One column is the student's name, so I could find that essay. The second column is the student's school. That helps me remember the essay. And the third column is the topic. So this is all on an Excel spreadsheet, and I have a tab for every year. So this is my 20th tab I'm working on. So what's interesting is to go through and look at topics, right? What are the topics of the best essays I've read every year? And probably about 10, maybe 15% are about the topics I think the outside world think it would be about, right? The really massive, life-changing topics, trauma, like surviving genocide, overcoming cancer, like these huge topics. It's about 10 or 15% of the topics. About 80, 85, maybe 90% of the topics are about small things. What it felt like to swim in the ocean that one day, why I mow my family's lawn, one of my favorites from a North Andover High student, how my dad is sometimes kind of embarrassing. It's the topics that the student found something when writing about. If you find that thing when writing it, whether it's meaning or mojo or just fun, that's what we'll find when reading it.
Thank you. Lastly, does your school offer interviews as part of the application process, and what role does it play?
At Worcester State, we do not offer interviews that are evaluative, meaning that they're going to be, sort of notes being taken, added to your file, and sort of considered as part of the admission process. But we're certainly happy to meet with any student that needs to speak with an admissions counselor to ask questions or learn more about our process. But we do not offer evaluative interviews at Worcester State.
We do at Holy Cross. It is a way for students to, I think, add content to their application, for us to get to know them better, excuse me, but also for students to get to know our school better. Obviously, there's always an opportunity for students to ask questions of us, to learn about the college a little bit more. We have lots of different kinds of people who do interviews for us. We have about 25 current Holy Cross seniors who do interviews. Admissions counselors do interviews. We also have some trained alumni interviews. We do a small number of these in person, but most of them, honestly, we do over Zoom because it works for you and it works for us. We do them beginning in June of your junior year, and we end them usually in December. I mentioned this. It's something you should think about when you start to identify schools you might apply to over the summer, to do a little quick research to find out if any of them offer interviews, and if they do, how you get an interview. I mention that now because I'm getting 2, 3, 4, 5 emails a day right now from current seniors that are saying, oh, I didn't know you offered interviews. Can I have an interview? And the answer is no. We're past the deadline, and they've missed that opportunity to add content to their application in that way. So there's always, any school that offers interviews, they go to great lengths to communicate that to you. And even if you've missed that, it's readily accessible information on their website.
Are there any additional questions? Yes.
Sorry, just building on what you just said, I just want to clarify, if your interview timing is from June to December, does that mean that a student can ask for an interview before they have even applied?
Yeah, at most colleges and universities that offer interviews, the interviews will take place before, there's no connection between the interview and the application. There's a small number of schools that will initiate an interview process after the student has applied. That's a real small minority of the overall college interviews that take place.
And then I assume that there's some way for the student to say, hey, I did this thing. If they do apply, right, is that the connection between?
Yeah, I mean, it's the most important thing we do in the college admissions world is track information. It all gets synced up.
Any other questions?
So you mentioned that chances of getting in vary on how competitive the class is. How competitive do you think the class of 2025 is compared to previous classes?
So I don't know, because we haven't seen your transcripts yet. But generally, like, there's a lot of hyperbolic information out there online about college admissions. It was a few years ago, it was like the most widely read article about college admissions was about Stanford's record low acceptance rate. Everyone was obsessed with the fact that no one got into Stanford. Most of the colleges and universities admit most of the applicants that they receive every single year. I think it is easy to get caught up into this hysteria of the schools that have single-digit acceptance rates out there. Understand that is a really tiny minority of the number of colleges and universities in the country. If you listen to your school counselor, they are likely to put you in a position to succeed when building a list of schools to apply to that will have balance as far as admissibility. They are not fortune seers. They cannot predict decisions, but they, at all times, they probably have more information than your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving.
I don't necessarily have, the observation that I have related to your question is more about your class will be the first class that will be sort of completely out of the COVID remote learning environment. The students that are applying right now, their freshman year is sort of that blip year on their transcript that we're seeing because they had shifted to remote learning and grades may have been impacted. So we're reading right now with that context in mind. But when the class of 2025 graduates, they would have been kind of come back to somewhat normalcy, right, in terms of in-person learning and not having those COVID blip years that we saw in transcripts for the last 2 or 3 years.
Other questions? Yes.
So I think I'm automatically headed into the embarrassing dad. My question is this: you guys run into thousands of 17-year-olds in your career. I run into only 2 or 3 that I know extraordinarily well. So when you offer the suggestions and lay out on the questions kind of thing, I really want to embrace that because teenagers generally better than I know my teenager, so I want to marry these 2 things. And my teenager, if I don't ask questions, she's going to be avoiding this. So how would you coach me to not ask questions, but still get this thing moving along?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I tried to explain was to hold off on the questions, but to support and provide exposure. On the way home from grandma's house, to just steer the car off the exit and to make a swing through that campus. You don't have to know what your child's preferences are for big school or small school to say, hey, we're going to go visit blank today, 20 minutes on our way home from X, Y, or Z, or to say, here's a great virtual tour that we can look at on the iPad. You don't have to know what she wants to study to share that experience with her. So once you've been able to provide a series of those, I think then the questions can start. But asking them questions now on an experience they haven't had and they haven't even started to shop around with, you're either likely to get no answers or answers that aren't correct, just answers that there might be parroting from other answers that they've heard their friends give.
Anything else?
Try to bring my thought into how to ask this question. For those students who do declare a major, for example, my son is in business, and I've heard from the surgeons that it's so highly competitive that should we consider thinking about going through a different major just to increase our chances and to strategize, how to increase that admission rate. What's your opinion on that? Can you repeat the question too?
Yeah, the question is, so for majors that are very highly competitive, should you consider applying into a different major to get yourself into the university and then switching majors if it's possible once you're already there? Does that capture what you're sort of asking?
I mean, my advice would be if the student wants business, they should apply to business. I mean, in my experience, any time a family tried to sort of, I don't want to necessarily say game or backdoor their way into the university, the process doesn't always work that way. Because I worked for I've been doing admissions for 20 years. Worcester State's the fourth university that I've worked at. One of the colleges I worked for was a large private research university in Boston. You can limit it down to which ones it might be, but the undeclared major was just as selective as the business major, right? So a selective university is going to be selective across all their majors. There's really no way to necessarily try and get yourself in. We get that question a lot with our nursing program, right? Well, can I come in public health or biology and then transfer into nursing? And you can't, because our nursing program is a direct entry only program. So there's that restriction. But then for other programs, your business major, your architecture major, your English major, just because of the selective nature of the university could be almost as, your undeclared major could be as selective as some of the other programs. So if the student wants business, I always say to a student, it's a lot easier to change out of nursing than it is to get into nursing, right? So in some instances, you might, once you get there, have the option to be able to change that major once you're there, because you're only then trying to move within the university of a class of, say, 2,000 first-year students, where when you're applying for admission, you're one of 100,000 applicants, right? So the numbers just aren't there sometimes as an applicant, where you have a little bit more grace when you're there as an actual student on the campus. So my advice would be, if they're thinking business, apply business. And maybe the business major might not work out, and the university is going to want to keep that student, right? So they're going to try and work with them to change them into an academic major that they're going to be interested in. But the admissions process is so subjective, and there's so many controls that are out of your hands as an applicant, that there's really no way to try and figure out a workaround when you're applying to a selective university in general, and even more so when you're applying to a really selective major.
I'll say I talked to a friend who works at a large public institution, and she was saying that their acceptance rate for transfers into the business program from their school was so much lower than their acceptance rate was for first-year admission into that business program. So, but that's not published information, like how many kids at the end of their freshman year asked to transfer into that program, and she was reporting hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids asking, and they were choosing 5. So the selectivity might be even worse once you're on campus. So I echo Joe's comments, best not to try to game the system.
Any other questions? Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about money, time, financially, what's out there in terms of merit-based aid,
Yeah, I guess I'll start generally speaking. So yeah, college is a major financial investment for families, right? So one of my pieces of advice, which I probably might be stealing my thunder with your last question, would be just like you're going to probably diversify your list in terms of the selectivity of the colleges you're applying to. Everyone should have those aspirational colleges, have your, sort of bread and butter in the middle, and maybe you have a few safety schools, although really safety is, you can't always count on even some safety schools. You should have that same diversification when you think about cost, right? You're going to be probably applying to schools that are a real financial reach for your family. There's some that are more in line, and then some more affordable options. And so that's really best practice. The financial aid, there's two primary forms, right? There's going to be free money that you're going to get from a college in the form of a merit scholarship. That's primarily based upon academics. You don't have to apply for financial aid to be considered for that. It's typically awarded through the admissions office, so we don't even know your financial situation when considering you for a merit scholarship. At some schools, that merit money is really just a discount. It's not actual real money. That's like, they're basically just cutting money off the sticker price. At other schools, that merit award is actual true money, true dollars that they're taking off of the price, giving you in the form of a scholarship. And then there's need-based aid. And typically speaking, the need-based aid is going to be pretty consistent based upon all the different types of colleges or universities that you're applying to, because that's going to be based upon what you can contribute, what their overall cost is. But if you get a loan from one school, it's likely that you're going to get a loan from all the other colleges that you're applying to. You're going to see the biggest discrepancy probably in that merit aid, because really the merit aid is a way for us to try and entice you to want to choose our college, right? So Holy Cross or a similar type school might be giving you a $30,000 scholarship because that's what the resources that they have available, and it's in context to what their overall cost is, where the average award at Worcester State might only be $3,000 because our cost of attendance is significantly lower, so it's relative to our overall cost. So sometimes I'll have families call and say, well, you guys only gave us 3, but this other school gave us 20. Well, because it's apples and oranges when comparing merit. As it relates to financial aid, need-based financial aid, everything's kind of up in the air right now, so I'm not going to get into the weeds about that because luckily for you, things should be worked out. But if you've gone through this process before with an older child, the FAFSA has been all redone this year for students that are currently seniors. So if you know someone going through the financial aid process right now, give them a hug because they need it. The FAFSA has been simplified down from 100 and something questions to about 36. But the process has been significantly delayed by months. So students can typically apply for financial aid in October. This process has been delayed. The FAFSA just became available on December 31st. And so that is obviously having a ripple effect on when colleges will access financial aid information and be able to consider students for any type of need-based financial aid. But hopefully this should all be worked out by the time that the class of 2025 will be applying for financial aid next year. But that's sort of my gist of how the financial aid process works. Merit-based aid through admissions, typically automatically considered as part of the admissions process when you're accepted, and then you've got need-based aid. The FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, is typically required, and I'll let Drew speak about an additional form that some universities also require in addition to the FAFSA for the need-based consideration.
Yeah, the secondary form is called the CSS profile. Certainly not all schools require that, but it's an additional documentation that some colleges and universities require. The one I work at does. I think most importantly, I just want to put a plug in for MEFA. That's M-E-F-A. We're all friends with the MEFA folks. We're friends with them because they are a nonprofit. They're here to help families navigate the financing side and the cost side of higher education. They have incredible resources on their website. They do great webinars. You can probably hear Joe on some webinars. They do a podcast. Subscribe to that podcast. It's just nothing but tips and advice about affording college. I go to their website all the time to learn stuff. So I think that's the best resource if you're a Massachusetts resident for learning schools. I send out-of-state people to their website as well because they have great information and great resources. MEFA.org. It's a good question to ask of each school individually. Some schools will be honest and say yes. Some schools will hopefully be honest and say no. Hopefully you'll get an honest answer, but it's a good question to ask. Because there are some schools out there that may temper their excitement to award merit aid to a family that has not applied for financial aid.
That's very diplomatic. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I'll take a 3-minute break and then we'll get started in the next section.
How are you? Coach on today? Same team. Yeah,
What are you doing here? You've already been through this. Yeah, but I don't think this one will just accept my notes from last time.
I feel like being able to hear it myself. Yeah, so maybe your CAPSA. And this year's CAPSA is the Hot Mess Express. It's not only did you take the Hot Mess Express, this year's CAPSA not only did you take
That's how I know whether they would want to work in my business. That's if they can figure it out quick.
That's your audition.
She's just troubleshooting one. Just going to trip over a couple papers and see how
Yeah, I thought we just went over the like if you were interested, you could like hear about doing the tech stuff. We are so glad that's happening this year. It's stressful.
That's what I mean. You want to plug it and you see whether they can handle that stress and pressure. Those are the kind of people I need to know.
Yeah. How far like and then that CSS or disadvantage we learned about the spotlight. And then we're told don't rely on the spotlight. It doesn't really work. Probably been years on it.
Then we go down the no accountability rabbit. Exactly. Like I actually don't know. I don't think I heard. I don't think I heard the fire alarm. Or maybe I just tuned it out. I didn't hear anything. She's been mentioning these like random fire alarms and stuff. And
the last one, no one got up.
she goes to the school.
Yeah, they base it on the town.
The superintendent, and I drop her off for it, and it's like, hey, just come in one of them, and I just want to stand up and be like, hey, please serve me. And like, the fire alarms are going off, and no one seems to care. And like, because, they apparently don't trust me.
I was ready to send an email.
And then this week we had
strongly worded email?
Yeah. But then this week there was
I'd rather that than me sitting with the other two students representatives. Well, you go, Mark Barrios,
like I was
but I'm
basically
sitting
told
right there on video, like, trying not
Look, the person I was sitting next to was the first one to ask a question today, so
Yes. I was told, I was like bullied. I was bullied into not asking questions. Like,
I told you you could ask questions.
you were
just
fine
not
with
that
no, not you,
question.
but she's a guy. She's a help. Marielle. Like, so I asked a question. I asked her,
All right, everybody, you want to take your seats? We're going to get started.
and got all kinds of and then we told her all about how I asked the question. And I'm like, oh my God, she's going to try to do it again. And I counted my questions.
All right. So the second half of our presentation this evening, our counselors are going to sort of walk us through each portion of the application college search process, talk about each topic. Upon coming into the auditorium tonight, you should have received a timeline. If you didn't receive one of those, we have some more copies. We can get ones to you after the presentation. We'll get started. So first. All right, hi everybody.
to M-A-M. So I think I see a bunch of you in the audience, but for those of you I haven't met, it's nice to see you all. Thanks for coming. This is the agenda for tonight. It's a big process. There's a lot of steps. I'm going to try and break it down in alignment with that timeline that you're taking home with you tonight. And it will all be on the website for you to revisit because we're that good. You might want to watch it again. All right. So the first slide here. There are so many colleges out there, and there's something for everyone. Whether you're looking at 2-year schools, 4-year schools, Drew and Drew exposure. Getting out there and seeing what every school has to offer and how you feel while you're there. I always like to tell students, when you are investing in a 4-year college education and potentially living on campus, or even just commuting and engaging in that campus, it is your home for those 4 years. So we want you to be applying to places that you are comfortable, and that you can really take advantage of all the opportunities in and out of the classroom on those campuses. All right, get started. The real big thing here is talking about college in general. And I know Drew mentioned maybe not asking so much questions right now. We're in January of your junior year. It's important that you're focused on your classes, boosting your GPA, showing your teachers what kind of student and person you are for those recommendations. All of those things should be the big priority, but just talking about college, visiting colleges, engaging online with colleges, and starting to gather your comfort level with each of those campuses or opportunities. Making a plan, figuring out your preferences, and then setting concrete goals. It is a massive process, but if we start really small and you start chipping away, it'll feel less daunting moving forward. And standardized testing is where that all it begins, really. The reason this is at the top of your presentation is because you can sink your teeth into this tomorrow if you wanted to. The test dates for the next couple months are already advertised, the test sites are already advertised, so you can go in tomorrow and start planning for your spring or your summer, or maybe you say I'm going to put it off till fall of senior year, but you can get a test date in your sites and start preparing for that test. We truly recommend, if you're applying to even one 4-year college, that you take the SAT or the ACT at least once. So those are the two types of standardized testing that you'll see. The SAT is run through the College Board. Now the College Board might sound familiar to you because of the PSATs, or because you're taking an AP course and you are registered through the AP coursework there. Whatever your account is for the PSATs or the APs, or if you haven't done either, all of those things fall under the College Board, in addition to the CSS profile, that extra financial aid application that Drew mentioned. So when you create that account, you're only going to create one, you should save that username and password and give that username and password to your parents as well. There will be times when you come down to your guidance counselor and you want to look at scores, or you have questions about CSS or things like that, and we'll ask you to log in. It's nearly impossible to figure out if you don't have that safely stored away. Don't just save it on your Chromebook, don't just save it on your home book, write it down, take a picture of it, and make sure you're managing that so we can help you when you do have questions. In addition to College Board having the CSS profile and having PSATs, APs, the SATs, they also have a connection with Khan Academy. I'm sure you've all heard of that growing up. It's an additional resource with study guides and tips and tricks. You can do a prep test for the SATs if that's the test you choose to take. The other test you could take is the ACT. We are not an ACT site at North Andover High School, but the ACTs usually run in alternate months than the SAT. The biggest difference between both tests is the ACT has a science content area that is scored. The SAT is just English and math. So if you're not sure which test you want to take, I'm going to provide links for you later, and again, that'll be on the website. But you could take one of each. You can just say, I'm going to take the ACT because I really feel strong in science. I want to see what that score is and be able to send that. The ACT is also connected to a test prep organization called Kaplan. So either way, there are resources out there that are free, part of the testing process that you can be working on bit by bit or prepping for future tests. The school library also has a ton of resources on their website as well. So if you need help with any of that, you can check in with the librarian or come see your guidance counselor. Just a couple of notes I already mentioned. Keep your usernames and passwords somewhere safe. We do not have access to your usernames or passwords. We are also not in charge of sending those scores when the time comes, if you choose to do that. Every school is also going to require something different, and even specific majors might require specific things of you. Which again is why we recommend that you take one of these tests at least once, so that you're able to provide that if and when one school needs it. If you have accommodations or are looking for accommodations like extra time, come talk to your guidance counselor. Both the SAT and the ACT have an application process for that. It is not guaranteed, but we will help you through that process as well. The test optional policy is a fantastic one. Since COVID, the majority of colleges and universities have gone test optional, giving you a lot more power and control over what each admissions officer sees. Even though it's test optional, again, you should take at least one of those tests once. And if you choose to take it twice, that's great too. But you want to make sure that if somebody needs it, that you're able to provide that and you're not stressing out in the fall of your senior year when the due dates are fast approaching. Again, if you leave here today and you can plan to take one of those tests in the next few months and you know you're taking it in May or you know you're taking it in August, that takes one weight off your shoulders and it kind of gets you rolling in the right direction to pay attention to what each school needs when the time comes. Some schools, I think Drew and Joe both mentioned it, you may decide to send your scores to some schools because it exceeds their average and it makes you look like a stronger candidate for their school. And then there might be other schools that you're not sending at all. That is a conversation that we will always have with you if and when the time comes, but just know that you're going to have a lot of freedom and power in that decision depending on what each school needs and what you decide is right for you. The testing, although it is standardized, and we're going to encourage you all to take it at least once, it is a very individualized process, and you're going to determine which schools see what, and that might vary from student to student, major to major, and school to school. Here are the test dates I was talking about earlier. They do provide these in advance, and I would recommend that you take a look. Once those test sites are full at max capacity, you can join a wait list, or you're looking to go a little farther out of our little area here. And if you're anything like me, taking a test somewhere comfortable makes me feel a little bit better about the endeavor altogether. So getting registered early and knowing where you're going and how to tackle that next step is something that I would really encourage you to do. We are a test site in March. For the SATs, we are also a test site in October. But for the ACT and any other month that works for you, you'll be taking that somewhere else. So doing that before those slots fill up. Does anybody have any questions about standardized testing? I know it's the most exciting part of the evening. Yes?
The test days here are the ones that are at North Andover, but for some reason none of those work. Are there local locations?
These are not at North Andover. These are just when they are provided. So schools like Brooks or Andover or Lawrence might be hosting them. But as soon as those are full, you might be looking at Manchester, or you might be looking a little farther out. The test is very early in the morning, and at both the ACT and the SAT, so knowing that you don't have to commute a far distance that morning is super helpful. So again, you don't have to leave here and say, I'm testing in March. That has to happen because College Bound Junior Night said so. But looking at it and saying, hey, this is what works for our family. This is what's going to give us the most time to prep. Or maybe I want to get through a little more math junior year before I register. I'm going to wait till August. But giving you guys the knowledge now so that you can put it on the calendar and make sure you're taking it somewhere you feel comfortable. Yes?
If they decide to take it in the spring, let's say, May or whatever, and they take it again in the fall, how long does it take the test scores to come back, and can you then pick which set of test scores get sent?
That's a great question. So they've gone digital at most schools and for most of the tests at this point in time. So the test scores are coming back way sooner. Within 3 weeks of taking it, your student will receive their test scores. So you can, in theory, take it in May and then decide you're going to take it in August as well. Usually it's every other month that they're offered. I know that there's a back-to-back one for the SATs, but you do have a little flexibility in there. And I would advise waiting to see the scores so you can make a determination. Come May or June, you might even have a better sense of some of the schools you're looking at and what they require, and that might help dictate if you decide you want to take it again. Other questions?
Good evening. My name is Megan Francis. I'm guidance counselor for students whose last name's MAN through PEO. I'm going to discuss some resources, some online resources for you. So if you leave here tonight and you're still hungry for more, just come on here and I'll show you some places you can go to get some more information. Mr. Adler just spoke about College Board. That's where you'll go to sign up for AP tests and SAT tests. The Common App is a website that students create a login and then they fill out an application which they can send to most of the schools they apply to. So there's about 1,000 schools on Common App. So you fill out the application one time and you can send it to the schools that you are applying to that take the Common App. So many students will end up applying through the Common App, and it's just a good website to know. Fairtest.org is a website that will show what schools require what standardized tests. So as you're making your list, you may want to go. It's updated pretty regularly and it's pretty detailed. It will tell you specific, some colleges will just want standardized tests for certain majors, and it often will show you the link to that school's policy. So it's a nice quick place to go as you're making your list and you want to organize what schools to send what tests to. The North Andover Guidance website is very helpful. And I particularly like this college corner right here. A lot of the stuff we'll be meeting with students later in the year, and we will again in the fall of next year. The handouts that we give to the kids, a lot of the discussions that we have with them that are more formal will be up on here. So anything that you, if the student leaves guidance and is looking, we're talking about a form that we had, that will all be available on our website. So this is a great place to go. In the fall, when you're looking at visits and trying to plan your schedules, which colleges are visiting the high school and when, that's updated on this website as well. There's a link to the Common App. There's also a link to Naviance. Naviance is an online program that many high schools use that is very helpful when starting the search process and just starting out. There's a lot of great resources on Naviance. All of the students applying to college will come to use Naviance in their senior year, but it's something that you can start using now. Packets were mailed home to families in the fall of this year with your Naviance registration code. If you don't have your code and don't know how to get that, just contact guidance and we can, your guidance counselor, we can help you log in. So you all have a code and you create your own password and you will come and use this. I'm just going to review with you some of the highlights of this website. Feel free to play around. You cannot break it. There's a lot on here. And I'm just going to give you a brief tutorial of some of the available sites here. So this, up here at the top, you can see it's broken up into self-discovery, careers, and colleges. I'll start with self-discovery. This is where to start if you don't know where to start. So on here, there's some personality tests, career assessments, strength explorers. These are all little quizzes that are going to ask you, the student, questions about yourself. So go through it, go with your first instinct, try to answer, it will ask you, do you prefer this or that? And you just start to answer some questions about yourself, and it may guide you in a direction toward what kind of career may be right for you. So if you really are overwhelmed by the process and feel like you can't imagine thinking of a major or focusing on, your next plan, this is a perfect place to start. Next is careers. So we have some careers. This will just show you several different careers that may be fun to just browse through. It talks about median salary, then you can click on it and it tells you more about the education you may need to pursue this career. Also a great place to start. There's also a tab under careers about military, and it explores all the military branches as well. Finally, colleges. So if you go to the college homepage, this is probably where, bless you, most students will spend most of their time, bless you. I'm going to start with the Supermatch. Now, if you start this process, it's going to ask you questions about what it is you are looking for in a college. When I sit with a student and they don't know how to answer any of these questions, for example, where would you like to be? What part of the country do you want to go to school in? Do you want a large school or a small school? Do you want to be in a big city or do you want to be rural? If you don't know the answer to those questions, put a pin in this. Don't start doing it until you've gone and got some exposure, visited some schools. If you think you want to go to school out in California, you don't have to wait until you can get a plane ticket to California to visit those schools. Check out Merrimack, it's so close. See if you enjoy the feeling of being in a small suburban school. Drive into Boston, check out some schools there. Start to view schools, walk around campus. Once you've seen a lot of schools, then these questions will be a lot easier for you. So it's really daunting to answer these questions if you know nothing about what you want to do. That being said, I'm going to just show you what this would look like if you did know. So here I went through this, and I went through my location and preferred major, if I were to do it all over again. And then you're going to go through, and it sort of talks to you about the tuition, it shows you the average GPA, a lot of really useful information. So you can click through, and if it's a school that you want to learn more about, just click favorite. And then we're going to go back to colleges, college home, and right where this heart is that says colleges I'm thinking about, those are going to be a list of the schools you've put a heart next to, which shows that you're thinking about it, you want to learn more about it, and it provides this nice little list for you. And then I like if you push compare me right here. This is a nice list that shows my information is up top. That's my average GPA and my SAT scores. Down here, it will have a green check if the school's average GPA is lower than mine, or a red X if the average GPA is higher than mine. So you're able to look at this list, and maybe it would help me take some schools off my list. Maybe it would make me want to find more schools that are closer to my GPA. This is all about gathering the list, and as one of our counselors will talk about a little bit later, this process I think is about building on your list, and then once you start to answer some of these questions and know more specifically what you're looking for, then you can start to narrow it down and find a good list of schools that are right for you. But once you have this list, you can, right here in the far right too, it will show you this is how many students have been accepted out of total applications we have. So this is data all from North Andover High School students that we collect here. This is one piece of the puzzle. You can also go to the school's website. College Board will have something similar that will show you national averages of students getting in, but this is just North Andover High School. So I think it's very useful when making your list of schools to try to figure out what your chances of are getting in. Again, you can't predict it, but it's very helpful, I think, to know what kind of shot you have. The other thing I think is fun to look at is called scattergrams. It's under Find Your Fit. In here, you just pick a school. I'll pick Ithaca College. And then it will be, it will show you a graph if you're a visual person. And then this, where am I? I am this blue check right there. In green are students who were applied and were accepted, and then the red were applied and denied, and purple were deferred. So another way for you to just have some confidence when building your list and trying to get a good idea of schools that seem like a good fit for you. Any questions about Naviance? Thank you.
I have one question. Are there international schools on that, or is it just schools in the States?
Yes. Yeah. All the schools that our students have applied to. Question? Yep.
When you're putting your GPA all that in there, what's the difference between weighted and unweighted?
So we use a weighted GPA at our our school, and that's what students are, the GPA they have is weighted, and that means that the level, we use the level that the class that they're in to calculate the GPA, and we use just academic courses. Colleges, when they see their GPA, they sometimes will recalculate based on their own system. So some college will take in your art classes and your gym classes, where we don't put that into the GPA, and some colleges may not look at the level that they're in, but we do, so it's a weighted GPA.
So you confirm GPA that's in your.
Yes, and we explain this to kids too next year when they're filling out the forms. When asked about your GPA, it's always out of 4.0 and it's weighted. That's the GPA that everybody has. Yep.
So you like take a test, like maybe like your game test, like swag, like from like different, you like retake those tests depending on like your current.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, good question. And they do save on there, but you can also start over and try it again. And I recommend you doing that. Your interest probably will sway if you do it now and then if you try it again next fall. Yeah. Right there. Question?
Hi everyone, I am Miss Tran. My caseload alphabet is from PEP to TI. So demonstrated interest is another part of the research process. It's pretty much how much you're interacting with colleges. So demonstrated interest is how colleges assess how interested a student is in attending their school, college, and admission counselors will have reported that demonstrated interest hold importance on the freshman admission decisions. Colleges want to see that students are taking the opportunities to learn about their schools. They keep this data on how many times students interact with their schools, whether it is going on a college visit, speaking to college reps, or simply emailing the admissions office to ask about a specific program that they're offering. They use this data to try to better predict which students will attend their school if they were to be admitted. So here are some of the different ways to show demonstrated interest. Every fall, we invite college admission reps to North Andover High School to give a presentation about their school. We encourage juniors and seniors to sign up through Naviance. This could be your opportunity to not only meet the admission rep that is reading your college application, but a good way to amp yourself up when you're talking to them. Alternatively, you can also attend college fairs. There are local college fairs that welcome you all to attend. The local ones are Phillips Andover Academy and Peabody Memorial High School. And this is also another opportunity to talk to those reps. They keep track of all this data. Every time you speak to them, they'll write your name down, or during those college fairs, they'll probably have you write like your name and email address. This is all data that they're pretty much keeping track in their system. So going on college tours, as juniors you have three documented college visit days. As seniors you will have 5. We ask that you go to guidance, grab a form, and fill that out and pass it back in 2 days prior to your visit. So there are different, as what Joe and Drew were saying earlier, going on college tours, whether it's informal or formal, this will help you pretty much figure out what college is the right fit for you. The difference between informal and formal, as everyone has been saying, is that formal, you'll probably most likely be signing up for a student-led admission tour, and some of those, some colleges will also include like a Q&A panel, whereas an informal college visit, that would pretty much be visiting on your own time, maybe going to a sport event or like a show on campus and taking the time to maybe sit and grab coffee beforehand and giving yourself time to like absorb the environment. Some stuff that I always encourage students to do on like a formal visit is maybe asking to shadow a student or even observing a class. Other exposure, like Drew said, drive-bys, visit college when you're on vacation. I wouldn't know so I went to Boston College. Like the first time before I even attended school, I went to maybe a basketball game. I wouldn't have known what the school spirit or school community would be like if I didn't go to these events, right? So this is the time for you to do that, especially when we're in Massachusetts and you have access to all these schools, right? This is your chance to go visit. We're down the street from Merrimack, walk through the student center, talk to some students maybe. This is your chance to pretty much ask these questions, figure out what you like or don't like, and this is how you form your preferences. Whether you're gonna have to figure out what school size you want to attend, or school size, distance from home, dorm options, and of course, like you won't know how, like if the food is good. I know that's important to a lot of people like myself. So like this is your chance to do all of that. And you won't know until you really visit, right? It's nice to see that we're transitioning to virtual visits and stuff, but you won't really know or feel the environment or the culture until you're actually on campus and interacting with some of these students or admission reps. Some of the questions that you could be asking are listed on the board. I think making sure you're asking the right questions, the questions that are important to you. So for me, let's say food, how many dining halls are there? Like what's the best place to get a meal? What's the best place to get a sandwich? All those things. Or what's the best freshman dorm to stay in? What class should I be trying to take when I'm on campus, or if I'm enrolled in the school, even if it's not my major. I took a forensic science class and I loved it. So things like that, you won't know until you're asking these questions or visiting campus. So in doing all this research and making sure you're going on ambiance and asking yourself these questions, reflection question, the next big step is to create a college list. I typically suggest for my students to start big and then narrow down. Once you start figuring out what you like, what you don't like, what you want to study, what feels good, what's important, you use this information to start narrowing down your list. We typically suggest forming a college list with a combination of a few reach schools, target schools, and safety schools, and that should definitely include financially safety schools. And then keeping in mind that while you're forming or trying to figure out how many schools to apply to, making sure that you keep in mind the application fees. These colleges cost a lot of money, or depending on how many colleges you apply to, they can rack up a lot. Application fees could range up to from $30 to $100 per application, and this doesn't include sending your SAT scores or the CSS profile, so just keep all of that in mind.
Okay, my name's Katie Hebert, one of the guidance counselors here at the high school. I have the beginning of the alphabet, so A through COQ. This is the time in the night where people start to feel a little overwhelmed. It's a long night. There's a lot of information being thrown at you. We get it. We're telling you everything from top to bottom, not to make this process harder, but just to kind of clarify a lot, and just know that we'll do a little bit at a time with everyone, and by the end of it, just like our seniors this year who have all applied to school successfully and are getting good news, you'll be the same. So just kind of trust the process. We've been doing this for a really long time. We know a lot, so please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I'm going to talk about the application a little bit, but I do not want you to be stressed about the application today. This is not something you need to go home and do. This is something you're talking about and thinking about in the summer. Most of your deadlines are not until November of next year. There'll be a few schools where the deadlines will be in October, but November is what we're thinking for when you need to submit your application. So this is just really an overview of what to expect on the application. I think a lot of our kids get real nervous because they've never filled out an application that maybe of this magnitude, and so they put it off. They don't want to do it. And then when they actually get down to it, they realize they know all the answers. There's not a lot of secrets, there's not a lot of tricks in the application. Minus the essay, which is very stressful, and we did talk about that, and we will do some more work on that. The application itself, really, we don't want you to be nervous about it. We don't want you to be scared off by it. So on top of the application, and I'll talk about the Common App in a second, Drew and Joe talked about supplements a little bit. And supplements are just anything additional to the general application that you're going to fill out. So sometimes, well, most of the time, it's usually an extra essay for that specific school. Recommendations we'll talk about in a minute too. You'll be getting recommendations from teachers. Your counselors will all write a recommendation for you as well. I've been doing this for 18 years. I've never written a negative recommendation for a student. No one's going to take the time to do that, so please take that fear and put it aside as well. If someone says yes, they'll write for you, they're only going to write nice things, so please don't worry about that. And then of course, the payment. So in order to apply to a school, you do have to pay for that. So though the Common App accepts over 900 colleges, please don't apply to 900. Well, I guess if you can, go for it. And also, are you hiring? So there's really two types of applications. We're going to talk a lot about the Common App. I am not going to go over every single thing about the Common App tonight. I just couldn't do that to you. It's too much. But what you should know is that 95% of the schools you're going to apply to are going to be on the Common App. Okay, so that's one application that you'll fill out and you'll send to all of your schools. Now, for the few schools that aren't on the Common App, Maryland, MIT, Georgetown, Endicott, they're going to have school-specific apps. All that means is you're going to go to their website and fill out their application on their website. It doesn't really change what we do for you. It doesn't change what we're going to send, when we can send it by, but just know those are kind of the two types. So to really focus on the Common App, what we wanted to show you was when you sign up for it, this is kind of like the first page. On the left, you'll see the different categories: profile, family, education, testing, academics, and writing. That's it. Those are all the categories. So once you've successfully filled out the questions in each category, you get a green check, you're ready to go. The writing, that's just the essay. You're uploading the essay, you'll finish that, green check, done. My advice, please work on your essay this spring and the summer. If you can come into the fall of senior year with a draft of your essay done, your stress level is going to be a lot less than anyone else who didn't do that. That really is a stressful part for you guys, and we get it. Come in with a draft so we have time to look it over, give you feedback. That can be really helpful for you. Profile, you know all the answers. It's your name, where do you live, your family, who do you live with, what do they do for work? You know the answers to these questions. Education will be about you go to North Andover High School, what's your GPA, what classes are you taking? Now, yes, there'll be extra questions in there, but this is kind of like the basics. So I just don't want kids to be scared off and worried about. Some kids, when we get really nervous, we put things off so we don't want to do it because we're afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. You know all the answers to everything. Again, we're not doing this till the summer, but just kind of wanted to show you. Activities is really one to spend a little bit more time on and be thoughtful. That's your showcase. That's telling the colleges, these are the things I've done with my time throughout high school. Colleges love kids who work. They love kids who are involved. So whether you're involved in sports or you're involved in clubs and activities, if you work, if you babysit, if you volunteer, youth group, that's all stuff that will go into that activity section. That really gets to show what you do outside of that transcript that Joe and Drew were talking a lot about. Okay? If you're sitting there and you're like, crap, I don't have anything to write under activities, you should panic a little, but you have time. You have time to join something, to get a job, to volunteer. Colleges are looking to admit kids who are going to be engaged in their campus. The best way to show them that you're engaged in their campus is to be engaged in ours, is to be engaged in your community around you. So if you're sitting there and you're like, ooh, I'm nervous about that section, you have time, but now's the time to start getting involved in that stuff. Any questions about like the general application, Common App? Okay.
My assumption that the Common App can be done in bits and pieces, so you don't just sit down and spend an afternoon with it?
Correct, yeah. You can save it and go back to it. Most kids will do that. If you really wanted to put your nose to the grindstone, you could get it done in an hour. But most kids will do it, go back to it, or do a section a night and go back to it and then look it over, yeah. Any other? Ooh, that's a great question. So the college stuff, use the one you're gonna check. And I know that kids get really inundated with emails from the high school. Whatever you use for the Common App itself, that's what colleges are going to reach out to you using. So when you apply, if you apply and you use your North Andover, that's any communication they have with you is gonna be through that account. So it's really whatever your student is gonna check, honestly. I would tell you for financial aid, because you'll be doing that every year, you might not wanna use your North Andover email because that will go away after you graduate, but for everything else, it's kind of high school, so it's up to you guys on that one. Yeah, the one's not that, just remember which one you use. It's very aggravating when you don't remember, for you more than for me. Any other questions? Okay, so one last thing, again, not for tonight, this is future, this is preview, things to look forward to in the fall. So counselors, we are in charge of sending your transcript, your teacher recommendations, and your guidance recommendation, and there's some school forms that we fill out for you as well. You are responsible for sending your application and your test scores if you choose to send them. So how do we know what schools you're applying to? The transcript release form is the biggest communication tool that we will use. This is how your counselor knows what school you're applying to, by what deadline, what teacher recommendations to send, and where to send them, most importantly. So you don't need to do anything with this today. Next year, this is the most important form. We will not send any of your transcripts or recs to schools if you don't put the school down on a transcript release form. It's very easy, your name, your counselor's name. On the left, you see the application deadline. So let's say November 1st if we're applying early. We're gonna apply early action. We're applying to UMass Amherst. And whatever 2 teachers you're applying are writing for you, so you'll put them in there, and then you'll circle, are you using the Common App for that school or the school-specific app? That's how we know what to send, when to send, and how to send it. We ask for that 30 days before your first deadline. If you're on November 1st, that means October 1st, okay? Now, if you just say you hand in your transcript all nice and neat, October 1st, you have a November 1st deadline, great, you did it right. It's October 15th and you want to add another school, can I add it? Of course you can. We already have gotten the things started for you. The reason we ask for this form so early for the first one is we need time to process your information, reach out to teachers, make sure they're uploading your recs. We have to write our own recs for you. So it takes us a while to get that packet that we talked about sent. But remember, your job is send the application, send your test scores if needed, turn in your form. We take care of everything else for you. Okay. Any other questions around application or activities? Great, okay.
Hello, I'm Sarah Coles. I have COR through HAM. I'm going to talk about application deadlines. These are actual deadlines, not suggested deadlines. So when a school gives you the deadline, that's when they want the material by. So these are the 4 most common deadlines. As the years have gone on, they've added more, but these are the most common ones. So early action and early decision, generally the same deadline, November 1st, November 15th, sometimes December 1st. The pros of applying early, you generally, by the time the end of December comes around, you know if you get into the school or not. The big difference is early action. You can apply to as many schools as you want early action. Early decision is binding. So you can only apply to 1 school early decision. I think Drew talked about it. If you are saying that you are applying to a school early decision, you're giving them you're saying with 100% confidence that you want to go. You have to sign a contract, parents have to sign a contract, the counselor has to sign a contract, so that if you get in to a school early decision, you apply to 3 early action schools, you now have to contact the early action schools and cancel your application. Regular decision, generally January 1st, January 15th, February 1st, February 15th, March 1st. Gives you a little bit of time. You can apply to some schools early action, maybe the top schools that you guys are looking for. You get your applications out early. For the schools that you might have 10 schools in mind, maybe 5 schools. You're like, if I get in, great, but they're not my top choice. You might apply to those schools regular decision, save a little bit of money. Rolling admissions. The earlier you apply, the earlier you're gonna find out. So if you guys are super motivated, parents, you're on your child to get your applications out, everything needs to be out by October 1st. Great, we won't necessarily be ready for you by November 1st. If you, October 1st, if you're looking at a school with an actual deadline, so November 1st, January 1st, whatever, schools are not looking at the deadline, the application until the deadline. For rolling, if you get it out, you're gonna get a decision within a couple of weeks. Rolling admission also means that you don't have to apply by a certain time, so if there's a school that you're interested in applying to, you see it's rolling decision, it's April, you're like, ooh, I just found this school, you can absolutely apply if it's rolling decision. Okay, a rolling admission. Certain majors, actually, so nursing is a big one. So though the deadline for a school might not be a regular decision deadline, a lot of the nursing programs will have a November 1st application. There are some select majors that do have the earlier deadline. So just make sure that as you're exploring what you want to study, you are aware if it's a regular decision or early action. Requesting teacher recommendations. So what you want to do this spring, please don't ask teachers yet, they're still finishing up their senior applications. I would say somewhere around April vacation, you're going to start asking 1, maybe 2 teachers for a recommendation. You do have to have the face-to-face conversation first. It's pretty quick. You can practice with your guidance counselor. Just saying, I'm interested in applying to schools. Would you write my recommendation? I would say 99% of teachers would say yes. They might have certain circumstances to why they might say no. That may not have to do with you. They might be overbooked for something else. So you'll have that face-to-face conversation with them. Some teachers will just say, I'm good, I don't need anything from you. Some teachers will require a little bit more information. They might want to know what your major is, some activities that you've done. So that would be the one or two teacher recs. Counselor recommendation, I think Ms. Hebert said it, we will write recommendations for all of you guys. There is a form on Naviance called the counselor recommendation form. Students must fill that out if they need a counselor recommendation. It just, as much as we want to know everything about every student we work with, we do know some students better than other students. So it just kind of evens the playing field, gives us a little bit more information, tells us something that we might not know about you. There's also a parent recommendation form in Naviance, so if you've created your parent portal, that one's optional, but we find that you brag about your student way more than they actually talk about themselves. So it is, it's helped us a lot in writing some pretty decent recommendations. And then financial aid. This is part of the process that we can help lead you, but we don't do a ton with because it's so personal with financial information. So the biggest one is the FAFSA. It says up here January 1st because of all the confusion that they've been going back and forth with this year. For years, the deadline or the start date that you could apply was January 1st. For a couple years, the last few years, it was October 1st. It was bumped to December 31st. There was talk about January 1st. For you guys, it will probably open up in October 1st of next year. So this is a free website. If for some reason you log on to one that looks like the FAFSA and it charges you, get off that site. That's not the actual one. Let's see. Then there is the CSS profile. This is not, so the FAFSA is federal aid. The CSS profile, I think Drew mentioned it, Holy Cross, there are some schools that require as part of the application process. If you make $100,000 or less, it's free to fill out. If you make more than that, I believe it's $25 to fill out. Some of the schools will want it submitted with your application. We've made calls to multiple schools when a student said, oh, I forgot to turn that CSS profile in, my application's submitted. Schools will take that after the deadline, even though they won't take the application. It is, according to some colleges, more invasive than the FAFSA, but they can give you additional money because it's coming directly from the school, not from federal aid. MIFA, so this was also mentioned, so MIFA is huge. They answer a ton of questions. They can offer you guys one-on-one support. They can walk you through from start to finish the entire financial aid process. They have webinars, they have podcasts, they have all sorts of information sessions that can answer any questions that you have. You Aspire, it seems like it's newer, similar to MIFA. It has application checklists, it has webinars, scholarship and basic events. They offers things like that. So those two, we don't know as much about the Aspire one, You Aspire, but it is up and coming. But MIFA is a pretty reputable one that's been around for a long time. In February, North Andover High School will offer a financial aid night here. So for the current juniors, you guys will be seniors, you'll be starting the process of financial aid. The person who spoke this year, I was not part of it, but some of the other counselors said he was fantastic, knowledgeable, answered some really good questions, so be on the lookout for that. I think Megan Francis just showed you some links to financial aid on the website. Scholarship opportunities. So the guidance website has local scholarships. So as, you know, some from the surrounding community will come in, they'll update those on the website. Some are available your junior year, so you can start checking those out. Or if you just want to start doing something as part of the college process now, you can look at the guidance website, look at scholarships that you might want to apply for. The ones that are offered now are also going to be offered next year for you guys. And then North Andover High School, I think we just put it out in the last week for the current seniors. It's a North Andover Guidance Scholarship Program. The elementary school that you guys went to, local banks, local urgent cares, there's a whole bunch of local scholarships. You'll have a short time frame, 3 to 4 weeks, to kind of complete that for local scholarships as well. One of the things, I must have missed the slide. So the components of the financial aid packet, grants and scholarships, you don't pay those back. So anything that financial aid gives you, a merit scholarship, an athletic scholarship, you don't have to pay any grants back, and you don't have to pay any scholarships back that you get. Loans, you do have to pay those back. So when you file through either FAFSA, CSS profile, whatever the schools give you for loan packages. There's private loans, and then there's the federally funded loans. And then college work study, so you might get the work study as part of your financial aid package when they send it to you. If you are getting a financial aid package that you're like, what else can we explore, and they haven't offered you work study, it's basically getting a job on campus. They'll pay you to work. It will help go towards your college fees, and you don't have to pay that back. Questions on any of that? No?
All right, so as you guys can see, there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. Katie put it best that there's a lot, we sort of previewed a lot of information for you tonight. We sort of wanted to walk you through soup to nuts how this process can look. However, when we meet with students and we sort of do our best to kind of chunk it and say these are the 2 or 3 action items you're working on now. And then in a couple months, we'll talk about the next few things you want to do. So this process is manageable. The biggest piece of advice I can give is to keep moving through the process. If you panic and sort of don't do anything, then it will start to become overwhelming. But if you sort of take little bites out of the apple as you go through the process, it will be much, much easier as we go along. All right. Are there any final questions? Yes. Great question. The GPA is located in Power School. It's active all the time. It's updated whenever a course ends. So at the end of the semester, we will store grades and award credit for any classes that are completed, which will update students' GPAs, and then it will happen again at the end of the school year. Yeah, we only provide a weighted GPA. Yes. You can. I would caution you as to why you'd need to do that or would want to do that. However, there's GPA calculators online where you can just take your grades and your transcript and input them, and it will give you a GPA. But I'd be careful about what you're using it for to make sure it's giving you accurate information. Yes. How many colleges are you allowed to apply to? Oh, recommendations. So we suggest 1 to 2 teacher recommendations. If you have a teacher here at the high school, or if you have an employer outside of school, an advisor for a club, something like that, that's totally fine. But we're kind of saying 2 teachers, coaches, advisors, and your counselor. Yes.
So I just want to clarify something you just said. So a coach could write a recommendation.
Yep.
And when you say that, you mean a coach from the high school or a coach from a club?
It could be from a club team, absolutely. So you want to have at least one academic teacher writing a recommendation for your student. But as Drew said, the best recommendations are going to be from people who actually know your student. If there's no academic recommendation, a little bit tough in terms of, because primarily you're going to college to be a student, right? However, we also want you to be a community member, a citizen of that college. So if the person who can provide the best context about your student is a club coach or an employer or someone outside of school, totally fine.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Other questions? Great. Thank you all for coming tonight. We really appreciate your time. Get home safe.